Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to this latest edition of Hospitality Talks by Hosco. This session is in partnership with the Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management and two of their professors. Today we have Sanjay Nadkarni and Roel Brinkman to dive in with us into this really exciting topic that we've got for today, which is artificial intelligence, or AI, versus sustainability. What will drive the future of hospitality? So I'm sure we've all heard of both of those terms of artificial intelligence and sustainability. And I'm sure that we all know that artificial intelligence is going to impact a lot of our lives as we move forward. Of course, artificial intelligence itself doesn't necessarily exist today in its purest form, but with machine learning and digital transformation, we're certainly working towards that. And we know the impact it's going to have on all of our lives in terms of the way that we work online, the way that we gain employment, the way that we analyze data, and many, many, many other areas. And then, of course, sustainability, which is probably one of the most hottest topics that we have today, because, of course, this impacts us as people who work, as people who are consumers, but actually, more importantly, as people. And of course, sustainability is deeply going to affect the future of our world and, of course, our beautiful, wonderful hospitality industry. So today with Sanjay and with Roel, we're going to deep dive into this, and we're going to have a little battle almost to understand what is going to drive the future of hospitality. Will it be artificial intelligence, digital transformation? Will it be sustainability and the introduction of new practices? Or actually, will it possibly be a combination of both of them? So I'm going to actually pass over to Sanjay Nadkarni right now, just to ask him to make a little introduction for himself. So Sanjay, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and say hello to our audience today, that would be fantastic.
My name is Sanjay Nadkarni. I'm the Director for Innovation and Research at the Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management. My domain interests have been in the convergence space of digital, AI, Industry 4.0 within the service industry. So that's me in short. You can look up my LinkedIn profile for details.
Brilliant. And you can find Sanjay on LinkedIn with his name. It's very easy to find him. And now I'd like to take a moment just to introduce Roel. So Roel, if you could just take a second to introduce yourself to our audience as well, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Welcome, all of you, and hello from Dubai. Hello from the Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management. My name is Roel Brinkman, acting here as a senior lecturer in hospitality and sustainability, which I am doing already for 15 years. And it's my personal mission to translate theory into a business practice and to make sure that people in the business get not only familiar with theory, but as well know how to apply it. And hopefully this session today will contribute to that ideal. I like Sanjay, my colleague. You can find me on LinkedIn too. Please feel free to drop me a line if you would like to have a further conversation. And I'm really looking forward, guys, to this session today.
Brilliant. That's fantastic, Roel. Thank you so much. So, of course, I don't want to wait too long before we dive into these two very interesting topics. Just a few more things to say. You can also find the Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management on LinkedIn. You'll also be able to find their website with a simple Google search. This is one of the premier hospitality education establishments in the Middle East and, in fact, the world, where they have multiple star professors, as we can see today. Also, one quick reminder that the question and answer section is open. So please, as we're going through the presentation, if you have any thoughts, if you have any questions about the program itself that they run at the Emirates Academy, if you have any questions about sustainability or AI, or if you maybe disagree or agree with anything that our two professors are saying today, please do not hesitate to pop that into the chat, and we'll go through those questions at the end. So just to explain a little bit more about the format of this, first of all, we'll dive into artificial intelligence with Sanjay. We'll take a little break for a few moments, and then we'll come back to Roel, who will present us his information on sustainability. And then at the end, we'll have a nice little wrap up for about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on the amount of questions. And we'll go into everything that you wanted to know, deep diving into this wonderfully interesting topic. So without much further ado, Sanjay, if I could ask you to please take control and to share your screen with our audience and to begin to take them into the wonderful world of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and digital transformation for our future.
Sure, thanks, Ben. Let me get to sharing my screen. Just a sec. Let me know if you're able to see my screen, folks.
We can see that now. Thank you, Sanjay. That's perfect.
All right, brilliant. Cool. So obviously, again, thanks, Ben, for the introductions and this opportunity to address this audience. And do feel free to stop me in case I get carried away with this rather exciting topic when my time comes up, right? Because I'm aware I have, 15 minutes to speak. But it's not just AI that I would like to speak about, but a wider range of technologies, as Ben mentioned, digital transformation, IoT, machine learning. So before we get into that, what do you think this is? Obviously, you can see it's a black swan with some formulas scribbled down there. Does anyone know what this is possibly? You can post it on the chat. We'll look at it later, of course. But just to let you all know, this is the Black Swan, which is a Black Swan event, which is an unpredictable event, which is that is normally expected of a situation and has potentially severe consequences. So, for instance, the COVID crisis that we are into now, that's a great example of a Black Swan event. So these are characterized by their extreme rarity, severe impact, and widespread insistence that they were obvious, but only in hindsight. The concept was originally formulated by Nassim Taleb way back in 2001. He is the one who's been credited with predicting the 2008 financial crisis. So you can look up the book, Fooled by Randomness by Taleb. This is just to set into context today's conversation, because what has happened as a result of this crisis is it's given rise to emerging opportunities because people's behavior has changed as a result of this pandemic. All along, we've been talking about digital transformation, particularly in the hospitality and the wider service industry. This has been the attitude. So what had already begun by way of digital transformation in bits and bits is now witnessing an accelerated deployment across all the sector verticals. So these industry 4.0 tools are no more just nice to have, but need to have. To set the context, let's demystify the jargon. What is Industry 4.0? Where do these jazzy terms like AI, machine learning, big data, IoT, blockchain, robotics, where do all these fit in? And what's all this got to do with hospitality? I'm sure many of you would have come across these concepts, but let's just, in the interest of setting the framework, look at what these tools are. So what you see on the screen is a high-level description of the various digital transformation elements that are now pretty much hot in the market. And obviously, our industry has been no exception to that. Some of these pillars, together with other emerging technologies, manifest themselves as what we know as Industry 4.0. We'll talk a bit about it later. But before we get into Industry 4.0, let's look at the world's most valuable resource. Obviously, traditionally, it has been oil. In a region which is pretty oil-rich, that's not the case anymore. Guess what's the most valuable resource today? It's the big D word, data. The Economist actually ran a cover page story on data being the new oil not that long ago. Right? So this data-driven revolution is what is now leading to the uptake of these new age technologies. So let's start with the Industrial Revolution, or IR 4.0 as we call it. But where did it all begin? The first industrial revolution was characterized by mechanization, the invention of the steam engine. The second industrial revolution was all about mass production, assembly lines. The third industrial revolution, or IR as it's called, has been about automation, electronics, computers, starting somewhere in the 70s, 80s. And today, we live in the age of the fourth industrial revolution, representing cyber-physical systems, IoT, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the like. So what I'd like to take you through is a random walk of our modest effort here at the Emirates Academy to bring Industry 4.0 into the hospitality and the wider service sector. What you see on this slide is the impact of AI and automation. There is nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no matter what industry you're working in. So whether we like it or not, Industry 4.0 will shake up the already shaken up job market because of COVID. And hence, the only way forward is upskilling. So here's a quick lowdown about what we do here at the Emirates Academy in terms of imparting those skill sets to students and for the wider benefit of the industry. So what you see on the slide is co-creation through design thinking, futures thinking. This is our newly designed innovation hub where we use these tools for agile process development frameworks for actually solving industry problems. So it's not necessarily just technology related, but it's technology driven and technology backed. We also get our students to pitch and win and accelerate. So what you see on the slide now is an example of our students pitching at hackathons. One of the teams ended up winning the second place, competing with industry professionals and tech whizzes. As a result of this kind of a culture that we are fostering here, in the last couple of years, we have incubated and mentored 2 startups, which have been fairly successful. One of them, Hoik, which has made its mark in the sentiment mining space, and the other startup, Work and, is making ripples in the job market and labor market space. Yeah. So we always emphasize on not just entrepreneurship, but upskilling the students to ensure that they stay on the forefront of what's coming. So because by the time they study in any degree program, by the time what is studied, it already gets outdated. So how do you stay up to speed? So this is something that we kind of encourage our students to look at. Now let's come to AI and machine learning, right? We were if not the first, at least one of the first institutions to introduce AI and AutoML into our MBA curriculum in partnership with DataRobot, one of the best-in-class AutoML platforms. And all this without requiring our students to write a single word of code. In fact, DataRobot have done a case study on us for pioneering AI and ML into the hospitality-focused MBA. So what you see on the screens is a booking cancellation prediction problem where the students analyzed about 80,000 data points using the DataRobot platform to come up with predictions on what type of guests are likely to cancel their bookings, because this is a huge thing for hotels, particularly post-COVID. Hotel cancellations, predicting hotel cancellations is kind of a holy grail. So this is just one example where data-driven decision-making is imparted with real-life data set. This is not some textbook problem. We looked at real-life data, real-world data, in order to make these type of predictions. Again, on the research side, part of the story, teaching, research, and application. So this is on the research side. Here is one of my recent publications on IoT and big data, where we collaborated with professors from other universities to come up with a roadmap for IoT and big data applications in hospitality. And there's also quite a bit on sustainability and an upcoming paper. So this is the kind of approach we take. Teaching informs research, research in turn informs application. So here's one of the patents we got within this space. So beyond publishing, this is a practical way in which technologies can have a positive impact on sustainability, which actually brings me to the title of this masterclass, AI versus Sustainability. So it's more about AI for sustainability, but we can debate and fight about this later during the Q&A. We're also taking a dive now into the metaverse, extended reality. This is now the hot thing. Facebook have already renamed themselves as Meta, and that's where the world is headed. So moving beyond just the audio visual, right? It's also sensory. So olfactory, that means smell, vestibular, motion. So these are the kind of technologies that are coming up and will have a huge impact on hospitality as well as sustainability. All this is to flatten the curve. The whole idea for us putting in this effort is to flatten the innovation adoption curve, which you're seeing, because we really like the future leaders of hospitality to be somewhere here on the left side of the curve through constant upskilling. That's what we are hoping to do, right? So basically, our industry has moved from high-tech, high-touch pre-COVID to high-tech, no-touch post-COVID, and that's exactly where Industry 4.0 applications are set to play a big role when it comes to knowledge gaining, upskilling, and basically how this can have an impact on sustainability. There are multiple ways. So for instance, we talked about the extended reality, right? Is it really necessary to travel? Obviously, for the experience, yes. Now, if your extended reality experience, not just audiovisual, as I mentioned, but going beyond that, like olfactory, smell-related, vestibular motion, touch, all these senses, if it can trick our brains into believing, let's say that, we are in the Arctic region, right? It makes me shiver, makes me move, whatever. Yeah. Will you actually travel? Will people actually still be traveling? Because there's already adequate research to say that this type of travel is having a negative impact on the environment. So will these technologies mitigate the problem? But then if that's the case, okay, Arctic, there are no people who are going to be unemployed, but in places where people depend on tourism and hospitality as their bread and butter, what kind of an impact would this have? So this is a question worth exploring. How many of us would compromise on actual travel if technology gives us that space to have that virtual experience? Yeah. So tricks our brain into believing we're actually there, not just in an audiovisual sense, but all the 5 senses are kind of involved here. So that's one example. Coming to AI now, artificial intelligence, predicting climate change, predicting a breakdown of let's say within the hotel space, the HVAC systems, right? So predictive maintenance, all this can go towards saving a lot of energy consumption. Water consumption is also another example. Internet of Things sensors, right? Sensors capturing data, feeding them into AI algorithms, and then the AI being able to give out some prescriptive suggestions on what needs to be done to optimally utilize these resources. So this is another example of where Industry 4.0 can impact sustainability. I mean, I can go on and on, but just a flavor of how each of these verticals, we spoke about AI, we spoke about extended reality, we spoke about IoT, robotics is another example. So the question is, it's not so much about AI versus sustainability, but more, as I said, AI for sustainability. It's all about Industry 4.0 supporting sustainable practices. I've yet to come across an example where AI can be accused of going in a direction which is against, sort of having a negative impact on sustainability. Obviously, mining Bitcoins. I mean, we spoke about blockchain as being one of the pillars. Mining Bitcoins is an example where a lot of energy is consumed, and that's again one of the areas that needs attention. But other than that, most of the technologies that we are aware of, we are actually using, are helping sustainability, helping achieve sustainability goals. So basically, that's the spiel I wanted to give in terms of these various technologies under the Industry 4.0 umbrella, contributing rather than contradicting sustainability objectives. I may have exceeded my time, I'm not sure, but I would love to have a discussion once we open up for Q&A. On that note, I will hand over to Ben. Ben, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. If you could just stop sharing your screen, that's fantastic. Yeah. Well, brilliant. I mean, I certainly have a lot of questions. I mean, you've already covered topics such as, how artificial intelligence is going to affect our mobility, the impact of social media. Of course, we all understand and know this word, the cloud and cloud computing, and how that's changed a lot of things in terms of software, in terms of hardware, and in terms of, our access and our reach to this sort of technology. And one thing I definitely would like us to cover a little bit later would be a little bit more conversation about IoT, the Internet of Things, which I think is something that maybe people have heard the concept before, but I think we might like to dive into that a little bit, as it's very important in terms of understanding our environment around us. And of course, it impacts directly what Roel is going to talk about with sustainability right now. And of course, I just have a little note about extended reality. I think that sounds fantastic. And I think we need to dive into that more to understand how that's going to affect hospitality, and especially probably revenue generation and room booking, just to sort of throw a little idea into the hat there. Okay, so I'm about to put myself on mute. Roel, if you could unmute yourself, and please, we'd love to hear about your thoughts on this battle for the ages between artificial intelligence and sustainability.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Let me quickly find my slides to share with you. And let's see how we can take it further from here. Yeah, the first point for everyone I would like to argue and I would like to make here, we heard Sanjay speaking about the new resource, right? And Sanjay was saying that should be data. Well, that is something I would like to argue already while I'm starting my slides here, because I think the new oil should be not data necessarily, but water, drinking water. Because in the end, you cannot drink or live on data, can you? But anyway, let's start off. I would like to take you to the beginning of this month, if that's okay with you. Let me see. I think you're seeing my control panel. Is that right?
Yes, we can see that. I think it's okay. I think it's okay. Hey, just carry on going, Roel. Don't worry. We can just see your next slide. It's like a preview of what your thoughts are going to be. So don't worry about that too much.
All right. Well, anyway, doesn't matter really. So let me take you indeed through the beginning of this month. We had, of course, the COP26, the community of parties who are there to translate and to put everything in practice what has been agreed in the Paris Agreement. And it's not about what the outcome has been or will be. It's not about what has been agreed or what has been discussed. I would like to concentrate and to zoom in here on Miss Mia Mottley, who is the Prime Minister of Barbados. You can have a look online on what her talk was about, but I found her talk in particularly very relevant. And let me cite her just to get the debate and the whole conversation starting. She said that national solutions do not work for global problems. That's one. The second, the solution proposed are looking at technologies which are still to be developed. And that relates very nicely to the Internet of Things and AI in that sense. She says that the effects of loss and damage are measured in lives and livelihoods from the people living in Barbados, from the people living on very fragile areas in the world. And last but not least, to wrap up that citation, is that Caribbean people in particular are living in the front line in the world when it comes down to the effects of our unsustainable practices over time. And I found that very relevant as a starting point because it addresses really well what the hospitality world and the tourism world is all about. Because in the end, their welfare is our welfare. Without them prospering, without them being in a perfect condition, it will be impossible for us to thrive our beautiful business, right? So very relevant and very happy that this has been addressed by her at that time. So the relationship then to hotel industry more particular. Although many areas in the world are on the border of crisis, it's only 1% it's being held accountable for all the CO2 emissions, is accountable for the hospitality industry or hotel industry in particular. So you might argue now that, what is 1%, we're doing fine, and why would we even care about improvement, or why would we even consider to do better? But we should here include as well the exponential growth of the business itself, and with that, all the opportunities within. I don't want to make anything negative here. So we have 268 planned openings as from October this year. So that means 50,500 hotel rooms in addition to the existing. So you could argue here is, the argument you could put forward here is, all the things we do at the moment in the field of sustainability, is that enough when we're considering this exponential growth? And we might even speak about a Malthusian track here, where the exponential growth is always outperforming all the good initiatives we are doing. If we're looking more closely at that 1%, what does it mean? What is the worth? If we're considering all the indirect emissions before the hotel journey and after the hotel journey, if we consider that too, then that 1% is not really, in that sense, very representable on everything what is happening surrounding hospitality and tourism. And we already know that throughout the supply chain, looking at the supply chain, traveling, transportation are one of the biggest contributors to that CO2 emission. Now, that brings me to another point. Can hotels be sustainable in the first place? If we're looking at the definition of sustainability, we could argue that hotels, by definitions, are unsustainable vehicles, because it is made for people's people wants and people desires, without acknowledging people needs. So we have created something which is not maybe really there to serve a need, if you know what I mean. And that connects very closely to the definition of sustainability itself. So the only thing what we can do, and the only responsibility we have, all of us, in education as well in the business, is to make sure that our business practices are being optimized to do as best as we can, because we're working in the end in a business which is not really needed for the majority of people on this beautiful planet. And I hope you understand what I mean with that. So let us have a look what we can do then in that business. Because the business what we have is a very complex business. And why is the business what we have, and why is the business so complex? Because we're dealing with so many people in that same business. Often the ownership of a hotel is carried by multiple persons. We have a whole set of shareholders all having a share in a stake in that beautiful property. It's not only the shareholders, but think about as well all the guests we are serving, all the employees we have. We're looking at 364 million employees worldwide, which we all in some way need to manage and need to guide into the direction of doing a good business practice. And that is only one side of the coin, because the other side of the coin is the investment people have to make to launch sustainability in hotel businesses. And the returning question here is, okay, what comes first, right? Where should we make the investment, and what do we gain from it? What will it cost us, and when will we get that return? So it's literally that chicken egg scenario in a very heterogeneous world, where we're trying to provide consistency in the good things we should do. So needless to say that this is a huge challenge and a very difficult path to walk. So can AI help here? That will be then a question to bring forward and to discuss a little bit later on. But before we do such a thing, I think we already have some practices in place which are already doing great, So because the business itself is so diverse and heterogeneous, because of that, I sincerely believe we might favor a lot from standardization procedures. Standardization, which could enhance the company culture in going green, and with that we can speak about a green company culture. Now, the effects of such a green company culture will be that everyone working in such an environment or being in such an environment will automatically being tweaked and being steered towards that desired business practice. Standardization ensures consistency, it ensures quality, reliability, and so on. And we can make a parallel to classification systems very easily. And if you still have arguments on that, what do you think about your standard operational procedures, your SOPs? SOPs are there to make sure that the minimum is being done. And in that sense, standardization might work really well once we have to deal with all these dynamics in the business. Now, what is then the effect of such a standardization? That you could certify yourself in showing everyone involved, in showing all the stakeholders involved, that you have met the minimum requirements. And certification by no means ensures that the company is sustainable, but it ensures that the company found the right way in becoming sustainable. Standardization, certification in that sense do work. And although some kind of certification systems might be argued, leading to doubts, in general, we may conclude already that certification like Green Globe, Green Key, but as well ISO, they're doing a good thing. They're doing a good thing in helping companies to get to the next step. Right. Does that mean we're done? Does that mean that, okay, with standardization certification, we can walk away from it and it works? No, absolutely not. Because I have seen too Green Key certified premises, Green Globe certified premises, who are really not that sustainable as I was hoping them to be. So there's always this variable, which again goes through human activity. What or what not ensures a good sustainable practice. And again, here we might want to make use from technology to improve that part, but that's a difficult one. And again, this is something what we could discuss a little bit later. Right. So let us zoom in on the role of people in that business for the remaining 8 minutes, if that's okay. Because people are funny beings, right, on this planet. They all have their own idea. They all have their own perception on how things should run. They have a lot of demands, especially in hospitality business. They're busy. They never have time in hospitality. They're always constrained. They work extremely hard, and that's all very true. But at the same time, those beautiful human beings might have certain norms as well, and certain backgrounds where we can tap into to make sure that whatever the company is projecting or whatever the company is suggesting, there is an opportunity there for the staff body, for the frontline employees to make that happen at the work floor itself. There is still an opportunity, and we should make use from the norms people have, and in line with the norms, we might want to make use from the values they have. And without going too much into the theoretical positions, I would like to make a huge jump here for you to highlight a little bit how we can activate those values, how we can activate those norms, and how we can make use from that better set. All right. So what can we do? We can activate people's values, and those values might be their service mentality or their appreciation of luxuriousness. So we call them hedonic value orientations or altruistic value orientations, doesn't matter for now, but we can activate them, we can make use from it. And how should we do that? Is to provide knowledge or to make use from their knowledge if they're lacking in knowledge. Because one of the biggest factors of an unsustainable practice, even in a green company culture, is the lack of knowledge or the lack of support. So knowledge and support should be provided. Another trigger to make people act upon severe things, upon important things, to have that sense of urgency, is to create awareness or concern. How many times do we see people speaking about releasing turtles in the ocean? How many times do we see pictures where people tearing out a plastic straw from that turtle's nose. It is purely done to create that awareness and that concern in making sure that people act upon it towards betterment, of course. Another big influencer in making people do what you want them to do in the field of sustainable development is to share benefits. If you do this, you get that, right? But that benefit is not necessarily only for the employee. That benefit could as well be related to the benefit of the guest you are serving, right? That means that if you do not change your bed linen today, you will get a drinking voucher in the bar for tonight. And it has been proven that this mentality fits really well with the value orientation people have working in a business. Because why do we work in a business? We work in a business, of course, to please someone else. So if we can please someone else by sharing benefits, that would work very, very well. The last two, which I would like to share with you, is that in contrast how I have started my presentation, sustainable development should be fun. This should be fun. It should not be positioned as something difficult or boring or something vague. No, keep it fun. You might want to have a look online on YouTube, check for the world's deepest bin, To have a look online on YouTube and you see exactly what I mean. So here we can use the fun element into making people move into the direction we want them to be again. Having that said, I think at the same time we should be critical to everything what comes to us, right? So yes, you can ditch the plastic bottle from the work floor, but if you're serving at the same time 5 dishes of beef, then you might ask yourself, hey, is that enough? Does that really contribute to an holistic, sustainable practice? Does that really represent our green company culture we're working in? And then the answer might be no, not. And perhaps you should then focus your attention on those areas where attention should be paid. All right, so here we have some simple techniques to activate someone's values in order to do what you want them to do in that sphere of sustainable development. And I'm making a huge jump here, guys, from a lot of theories who have looked into norms, who have looked into social norms, who have looked into value beliefs and norms, and so on, and so on, and so on. But it's always my goal to provide you main takeaways, which can be applied directly here in the business. So zooming in a little bit more on how to change individual behavior, what I would like to share with you in remaining 2 minutes, okay, what is that behavior then subject to? And that could be behavior from your guest as well, behavior from your staff members. That behavior is completely subject to what it will cost them and what they will benefit from. So the investment made then should be realistically projected, otherwise people will not behave into that direction. Another factor influencing that individual behavior is the moral obligation people feel to have, or maybe a normative, environmental normative concern, right? And that might be influenced by those sort of social norms or not. I think here in Dubai, we see a great example how expats are maneuvering here in the city, in contrast how they would maneuver to the cities where they're from, or the countries they're from. There is a difference here. So what is the social norm then doing here in that type of behavior? It could be affection and symbolism. Look at me driving a Tesla, look at me being so cool in sustainable wise. But you have seen the previous picture too, where that girl was walking on that beach full of trash. Those pictures you see normally not on Instagram. You always would see a pristine beach with the same girl carrying someone over that beach. That is purely to set the tone. That is purely symbolic. But you could do that the other way around as well in favoring sustainable practices at the work floor. Secondly, it is all subject to contextual factors. So that means if you don't provide an alternative as a company, then how in the world could you expect then from your employees to do, or from your guests, although your guests are can be never held accountable or responsible for the unsustainable practices in your property. And last but not least, what is then subject to this is habits. Yeah, if you always have used a certain thing to do a certain thing, it will be very difficult to change that. And for those who are smoking, you know exactly what I mean. So my final few seconds, we can intervene. I highly encourage you to do that. Based on the studies of Linda Steck and Charles Fleck in 2009, there are two strategies you could adopt. If the target is very easy to reach, and if you would like to do something simple, keep it simple, use those activation tools, be a role model, lead by example, and be part of the solution, right? I don't think personally AI fits here. I believe AI fits in a structural strategy, because if the matter is getting very complex, and despite your certification and despite all the tips and tricks in regards to norms and values, and still things do not happen, then we might want to change the context, and that can be done through technology, right? That can be done through technology. Booking.com already is trying here big time on stimulating green behavior. And last but not least, but I don't want to go that route, please, rewarding or punishing behavior. Well, if you really still have difficulties in becoming a true sustainable enterprise, yeah, you might want to reward, or you might want to punish behavior you don't like to see. And this is something as well which is more and more happening, because as Ms. Motley was saying, we are running out of time. So in that case, rewarding or punishing behavior might still be something to consider. So thank you for your attention, and I would love to speak more about this with Sanjay and Ben in the Q&A. So back to you, Ben. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roel. If you could stop sharing your screen now, that would be fantastic. Brilliant. Well, that was really, really interesting. I've got lots of questions. We've got lots of questions in the Q&A, and I have quite a few in the chat as well. But I'm going to start with one that I think probably impacts both of you. It's from a lady called Tisha. Her question is, it's a bit of a phrase actually. She said that you think sustainable business, or we often think sustainable business or businesses are expensive businesses. Now, why is sustainability expensive? And what role does AI possibly play in reducing the cost of that? And do we look at the value of goods today correctly? Roel, I'm going to ask you to go first, and then Sanjay, I'll give you a moment to think, and then you can dive in.
Yeah. A very relevant question, and I'm really happy with the latter part of that question. You know, which concentrates on, are we paying the right price for goods and services? And I think the question here nails it really well, because sustainability, I don't think, is necessarily an expensive thing. You could ask yourself, why is the unsustainable offering so cheap? Right? So that is indeed the tension field, what we're looking at. How can it be that organic yogurt is more expensive than non-organic yogurt? If we want to make people change behavior, and if we would like to stimulate people doing the right thing, it should be the opposite. And IKEA is doing a great job in this, where the vegetarian hot dog is cheaper than the normal hot dog. So they get it really well. Maybe not for the same reasoning, but there is a change in that perception on the way.
Brilliant answer. And Sanjay, what do you think about this? How can AI help us, or machine learning, or any digital transformation element? How can that make us judge the value of products correctly? Or what is there in the data bank, in the wallet of artificial intelligence, that can help us sort of make that mindset change that we all need?
I'll pick on the word value, which is different from price. And when we look at it overall, it's the triple bottom line. We're not just talking about environmental sustainability, we're also talking about social and economic sustainability. So there has to be a kind of a balance between all these three. And this is where technologies can play a big role, because you have the optimization, how to optimize such a complex ecosystem. This is where AI algorithms can certainly contribute. So therefore, when it comes to achieving environmental goals, reducing the carbon footprint, what is the cost from an economic sense, and what is the cost or benefit from a social sense. All these three need to be factored into that balance sheet, right? Normally, when we talk about the balance sheets, it's all about numbers and money. And therefore, there has to be a shift in the thinking paradigm of people who are in the C-suite, those who are running businesses, on how this can be made more sustainable in a real sense, not just ticking the box, following the standards, and reporting this as CSR.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds maybe more like we need almost a revolution in the way that we think about these things. You know, we need a revolution in the way that we think about this idea of cost and about value to represent a more real reality, basically, I think, no? Something that's a bit more appropriate to what we have. Oh, Sanjay, we've got a very good one for you here. And I know this is part of your expertise, okay? So AI in recruitment can feel overwhelming, right? And people can think it's biased against genuine candidates who might be a little bit slow on digital applications or might not understand. I think maybe we're talking about possibly people who are slightly older in this context, or maybe people who come from countries with less access to software and hardware. So AI can be overwhelming and can be biased against genuine candidates who are slow in digital applications. How can a business balance this out? How can a business find a great candidate who doesn't understand that we have applicant tracking systems, you know, software that reads words? How can we help AI remove possibly its own bias against people who are not digitally savvy or native?
That's a great question, actually. In fact, it's a huge problem. Ethics and AI are a huge issue now. And what happens typically is often standard programming is passed off as AI, which shouldn't be the case. So if a company sets rules that, okay, we want to exclude candidates of a certain category, that's it. The system will reject. That's not AI. But then you also have algorithms which have been trained with a lot of data sets in terms of recruitment patterns. Depending on what data are fed into the system, that is the prediction it will churn out. So it's as good as the data that are fed into it. The algorithm may be perfect. However, what fuels that algorithm are the data. So the data quality becomes a very, very important issue. And to have unbiased data fed into the system, that is the responsibility of the people who are deploying these systems for recruitment. This is actually, for instance, GPT-3, which is now a rage in the AI world. It can write essays for you. It can compose music for you. You cannot distinguish whether it's done by a machine or a human. But even that, when it was put to test, it gave out biases. Why? Because the data that have been fed into training this model, which has over 175 billion parameters, was already biased in a certain way. So the issue of data bias is something for ethicists to address, and this should be part of the political correctness or whatever policy the companies adopt for ensuring that this does not have they do not exclude genuine qualified candidates by rejecting those that are sort of excluded by the algorithm.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's important to understand that anything we work with in this artificial intelligence, machine learning world is, as you said, it's driven by the data it already has. It's driven by the people who programmed it, who made it, and it's then also driven by the focus that it's given on the other side of it, right? So what we put into it and what we ask it to turn out, what happens in the middle, this is kind of our responsibility, you know, as a society, I guess, in that way.
It's a bit like GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out, exactly. Yeah. So less McDonald's, more, you know, steak. Although we love McDonald's, of course, none of us don't like McDonald's in the right time. It's vegetarian steak, the lab-grown vegetarian steak, Sanjay. That's the future of sustainability. So, Roel, I'm going to flip on to you, and I've got a fairly. It's not a complicated question, right? But you said that we need to change our guests' behavior, or try to change our guests' behavior, right? And to become a little bit more sustainable. How can we balance that with the fact that most of our guests arrive by plane, not by train or by, well, we also know that shipping and boating can be quite polluting as well. And is that what we should try to do? And I've got a follow-up question to come on after this one as well.
First of all, I think we all have a responsibility to educate our guests. That is our responsibility of professionals in that business, right? I believe because of that your guest could be the co-creator of that greatness you're looking for, or the improvements to make. I realize at the same time that will be a bit utopia, right? It will hardly happen, especially not in the luxury high-end properties where service, availability, consumerism is expected to be widely rolled out, and which goes on the back completely of all the sustainable initiatives at hand. So what could be done is to find still that relationship with OTAs, to find relationship with airlines, to allow people to compensate their behavior. Although CO2 compensation is a highly debated topic, I still believe in today's world that this is at least as well a very good step forward, because it makes people aware. You put the responsibility again back to people, and you might want to offer discounts for those who do. So again, here too, there are some mechanisms which can be easily applied, and which connects again very closely to benefits you provide if people show the right behavior. So this is like the positive reinforcement, right? What you could do with your children as well. And that normally helps to stimulate people in doing the right thing. We see these practices already for years in our hotel rooms when it comes down to lighting, when it comes down to towel usage, when it comes down to water usage. So it's not something new necessarily, but it could be maybe enhanced a little bit further. And it could be broadened. It could be broadened a little bit in looking to the pre-stage of that hotel visit and the post-stage too, and to see what is happening there. Because again, like you were saying, the majority, of all the emissions and the majority of the pressure on the planet is often being done before and after, rather than within the hotel. So that relationship should be found there. And again, a partnership with OTAs and with transportation systems or with political systems might work really well.
And it leads me to another question, which I think is quite interesting. We all have an individual responsibility for our planet and for our environment, but we all also work in industries and in businesses that are much bigger than ourselves. How can we as individuals, as part of an industry, drive a bit more in that? Is it more conversations with our guests? Is it more conversations with your management, conversations with your team members? Because I always find it interesting to understand the balance between individual responsibility and societal responsibility, right? It's a difficult bridge for us to jump over.
A very good point. Indeed, practice what you preach, walk the talk are very popular phrases within this field. I didn't want to bring up the name, but let me do it anyway. Greta Thunberg, the Greta Thunberg effect. I mean, she was just an individual and she made a movement, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that we all should be Greta here, but indeed, we all do have a responsibility to stimulate the company we're in. To do better. Don't forget, triple bottom line is not only top down, it is bottom up as well. So if you have great ideas, if you have a great way of moving forward, then for sure your line manager will listen, and for sure it will reach top management, and for sure improvement will take place. Let us not forget, all those companies do realize, and the hunt for talent is very severe, and that talent is Generation Z, and Generation Z is very sensitive on how businesses are run, and you do not want to be the least preferable one for that talent to choose, right? Mm-hmm. So companies, if they're wise, they step up they step up the game, and they listen to what their employment body like, and they listen to those initiatives from those youngsters entering the market. Because don't forget, here at school, that is our job and what we do very nicely. It cannot be that the moment those youngsters are reaching the market, then they see the opposite happening and that their voice is not being heard. So be supportive, be encouraged. It goes bottom up as it goes top down. And as long it is improving the business performance, although that is a challenge, but as long it is, because it's still the chicken and the egg question in the end, then I am confident that people will listen.
I think so. I think so. And I think from this, I get the impression that it's always better to lead the charge than to follow the charge. You know, it's always better to be first, to be in that first group, to be part of the people changing the conversation from leading the conversation rather than following the conversation. And you can't influence or impact, or you can influence and impact less compared to if you're leading the charge, you know, and really driving this forward.
Yeah. You know, it's like a drop of oil in the water, right? It just, it organically grows. And you might be able to inspire people. You might get people on board, but it starts with you as an individual. Finger pointing has never, ever led to a better performance overall.
No, exactly. Yeah, we've got to do this together. We've got to move together. We've got to move forward together. So Sanjay, I have a question here for you. And actually, it's a very interesting one. And I'm really interested to find out, what are the names, or is the name, depending on how many, of the systems and devices that you use for virtual reality experience learning at EAHM, sorry.
Yeah. So we have partnered with Eon. They provide an entire ecosystem. And of course, as far as the hardware is concerned, there's lots of them out there in the market. And what we are working towards is providing these type of courses wherein VR, extended reality, is actually integrated. So for instance, going on a tour of a vineyard someplace far away. Now, because of all these COVID restrictions, travel is not exactly as easy as it used to be. So therefore, can this be done in a way where the vineyards can be visited in a virtual environment with what we call 6 degrees of freedom devices, right? So that kind of gives you a better a sense of being there when you're actually not there. And then at the same time, for instance, let's say tea estates, vineyards, coffee plantations, whatever you want. So imagine sipping tea from a particular tea estate while having that virtual sort of experience of being there. So there's quite a few players out there. We are in partnership with Eon, as I showed on one of the slides. This is something we are taking forward now to actually bring into the classroom. So watch out for this space on our social media platforms and on our website.
Brilliant. And I'm going to ask you to confirm something you just said. You said 6 degrees of freedom headsets or something called this, the 6 degrees. What are the 6 degrees, or what are these 6 points? I can think of 4 of them.
That's more. So there's you have devices of 2 types: 3 DOF or degrees of freedom and 6 degrees of freedom. The 6 DOF provide a much more immersive experience than the 3 DOF. So essentially, it's about you wearing a headset and basically not having to rely on, let's say, a device like a screen to have that immersive experience.
Okay. So it's a deeper, more immersive experience that sort Absolutely. Of you feel you're even more transported into this extended reality world.
Bravo. Yeah.
Brilliant. And I've got a comment which I'm going to flip into a question here. How will data help to preserve and save water? In specifically in places like Dubai, the Middle East. Hosco itself is based in Barcelona. We have smart measuring systems for our irrigation for our plants here. But how will AI and data, how will it help us preserve and sort of conserve our water and help sustainability drive it forward more?
Yeah, so for instance, you have sensors, essentially IoT, gathering data on water tables around the world or in a particular area. Yeah. So basically, the quantity of water, quality of water, all these can be gauged through these technologies. These in turn feed into having policies wherein how water can be conserved, to what extent it needs to be purified for whatever purposes, drinking, for instance, rationing water. All these elements come in through these type of technologies. To give you a simple example, when we come into a hotel room, right, when we check in, we want to take a shower. This is a new, we're not familiar with the temperature of the water, so we keep fiddling and wasting water. Wouldn't it be great if my profile is on record, my temperature, my preference for a temperature, whatever, 30 degrees, 35 degrees is on record. And the moment I turn on the tap for my shower, I get the desired temperature. See how much water is saved. This is already possible. This is not fantasy. It's being done. I have partnered with startups that are actually doing this. All the data that are collected. Now, I know there is GDPR and privacy, but if you're willing to trade off a bit in the interest of sustainability, there's a real lot that can be done.
I think so. I mean, I think obviously it's beyond our comprehension what machines and what software can do for us in terms of making things better, because the computational power is so much bigger, and the ability of all of these systems and this intelligence to make connections that we ourselves find difficult to make. I think that's something incredibly interesting. So we've reached the end of the hour, but I'm probably going to continue on for another few minutes just so we can get through a few more questions, because we've still got lots of interesting things here. But if anybody wants to leave, if they've got another appointment, in about a week or so probably next Wednesday or Thursday, you'll receive the full recording of the session, and I'll speak to Sanjay and to Roel and ask them if we can also include some slides as well in that email that we send out to you, so you'll have a bit of a slide deck and a bit more information about the two topics. And of course, if you do want to find out more about the International Hospitality Management MA, the Emirates Academy of Hospitality Management website has a lot of details. And again, we'll do a little follow-up when we actually contact you in a week afterwards. But anyway, that little aside gone, let's carry on plowing into these. A really interesting question here from Oliver Chikuta. How has your academy utilized AI to teach practical hospitality modules during the COVID-19 pandemic, if you have at all? Or have you used any kind of other external technologies or machine learning to deliver lessons, or has the pandemic sort of changed the way you interact with the with the software world and your students at all, Sanjay?
Well, I mean, we didn't use AI to deliver the courses, but what it pushed us to do was to include AI in the courses, which were then being offered via Microsoft Teams. Yeah. So instead of, I mean, I'll give you an example. So I teach business statistics on the MBA program, and statistics in itself may not be really such an exciting subject to teach even face-to-face. Imagine doing this online, right? So that's when we pivoted, partnered with Data Robot. They have a full cloud-based platform. I was very lucky to get access for my students and for myself to run an entire course, well, not entire, I would say about 40-50% of the course, focusing on AI applications within hospitality. And this was done in a very interactive way. Moving forward, what AI can do in the actual learning space, there's quite a bit. All right, to predict whether the class, how many of the students will stay online, how many will churn because the class is boring or not so boring. All this stuff is already happening, right? So for instance, right now, as we are having a call, this webinar, how many people dropped off when I was speaking will give an indication how boring I have been, for example.
Sanjay, I don't believe that for 1 second at all. So you're a raconteur of conversation. So don't talk yourself down. Superb. Roel, I've got. This is a tough question, hey. So I hope you're ready for something. So how can we get tourists to contribute to developing economies, whilst sort of balancing the fact that some of the hotel industry and the tourism industry are in destinations that lack legislation and policy sort of directed towards this? I mean, I think if we look at the huge swathe of the world, we've got the first world, the developed world, and the developing world. Of course, tourism is everywhere. So how can tourists who go to developing countries and developing economies, how can they lessen their impact, I guess, is probably this question.
Yeah, a good question indeed, a huge dilemma at the same time. certified companies who have been certified by Greenberg, whoever, they provide, those certification companies provide guidance for those companies how to benefit community and how to benefit the environment where their tourism business practices are located.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, it comes down to the point that everyone in that community should benefit from your presence as a tourist. That means that it's not only the hotel chain or the property which has attracted tourists, but as well all the supporting communities surrounding that property. They should benefit at the same time from that tourism hub on that destination.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily directly the responsibility of the tourist itself, but you could look for to what extent communities are benefiting from touristic presence in the area. Mm-hmm. And again, once that touristic presence is being certified, you can already be ensured that community will benefit from that touristic activity in the region. Where would you put your money then as a tourist? That's another responsibility you could take, and that we already touched this a little bit earlier. Ask yourself as well, would you buy all the tours and all the souvenirs? Would you purchase them on site, and would it all be linked to that organization? Or would you rather spend your money to those locals who can do the job as good, but who are not necessarily within the premises, but outside? Would you rather spend your money there and let that benefit from your presence? Now, let me give you an example. I went once to a touristic destination in Africa, and I had two options as well, on-site, off-site. Of course, being a tourist, I would choose the on-site one because it felt safe and secure and, value for money. And throughout my holidays, I discovered the offering outside the premises, and we took it eventually. And then the guy said to me, you're the only couple I will be doing this high season. The only couple I will provide a tour this high season. And then I said, wow, that is something. And I was looking around with my wife, and indeed, there was a lineup of offerings like crazy, right? And they all had to wait until that moment of offering their services. So imagine that we did not book their services. That would mean that his whole season is lost because he had to step again back in line. So making sure that the community is benefiting from your touristic activity is a very good way of moving forward.
Yeah,
a very good way.
Yeah, it sounds like, I think, again, we always go back to that point that we have an individual responsibility, but we have to view ourselves as part of a society. And then we have to view all of our actions as part of impact, right? So, if we take that trip, it's going to have an impact. We can negate, we can remove some of that impact. But of course, we have to consider that as part of, this whole picture of a sustainable world that we're moving towards, right?
And again, if you have the option between a certified property and a non-certified property, I'm not having shares in those certification systems, but truly a certified property gives room for these voluntarily touristic initiatives. So you will be, as a tourist, more stimulated to do such a thing, and you will be more supported to do such a thing. And even if you will not, then you at least are ensured that the company will to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. And that's the value in that sense of certification, and what it does do to employees as well customers.
Exactly. No, I think that's brilliant. And I think, we can even look at this through the image of, should I go to a destination with less tourism, where potentially there could be less long-term impact on the environment? Or do I go to somewhere nearby where I live, the Costa del Sol or the Costa Blanca or Brava, where it's incredibly developed, and the natural environment has already been impacted. So we're always faced with a choice, but we can always be responsible in our actions, no?
Oh, absolutely. And we see out there that more and more people taking that responsibility and demanding from the business to to take turn and to improve and to step up the game. So new initiatives are rising, niche markets are rising. Back to authenticity, back to nature, back to basic is a growing market. Shameful flying, shameful holidays. Who wants that? No one wants that.
No,
so,
we all want to glamp and fly freely, and and sort of be understood. Glamping, it's fantastic.
At least having a zero impact on the region you're going to, negatively, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Negative, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, and Sanjay, I've got one more question for you, and then I think we can do a little wrap up. We're going to finish on an interesting question, Sanjay. So, will AI be used mostly to reach the best level of guest experience and not replace human beings?
AI can never replace human beings.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't yet gotten there, and I doubt whether we will get there in the foreseeable future. What AI can do is help the hospitality industry to automate routine tasks, to make predictions about guest behavior, and therefore, when it comes to the hotel workforce, they can be better equipped to provide excellent service to the guests to have a more memorable experience. At the same time, simultaneously, AI can also help mitigate the environmental impact, as I mentioned about optimizing the resource usage, right? When I say AI, I mean the entire ecosystem, Industry 4.0, IoT, AI, the whole spiel. So therefore, AI should not be viewed as a threat. That said, it is very essential for people, no matter what industry you're working in, to be aware of what AI is capable of and leverage it in your particular work role. So instead of working hard, you work smart.
And that's a very good bit of advice for a Wednesday morning, Sanjay. Work smart, not hard. Work hard and work smart, but don't just work hard without working smart. Fantastic. So I think we'll probably call it a day. We could carry on this chat forever. This is incredibly interesting. Roel, Sanjay, it's been super interesting. I've loved this chat. I found it very insightful. And I think what we've learned is that we're all part of a society with individual responsibility. AI is not going to come and take our jobs. It's going to come and make our future better. And is this a competition between these two elements of artificial intelligence and sustainability? Or is it, in fact, the idea of both of them pulling together and actually bringing us a brighter, newer, more tourism-friendly, more sustainable future? And I think we got to that answer thanks to the wonderful contributions of Sanjay and Roel. Yeah. So as I said, we'll follow up in about 1 week with the recording of this webinar. So you'll get some more information about the Emirates Academy and the course that they run, which is the International Hospitality Management Masters there as well. So Sanjay, if you'd like to say goodbye.
Thanks, it's been wonderful. Sorry if I couldn't answer all the questions I'm seeing in the chat, but feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and happy to have a conversation. Thanks everyone for your patience and joining this webinar.
Brilliant. And Roel as well, if you'd just like to say goodbye as well.
Yeah, of course. Same from my end. Great to see the great number of participants, and thank you for your time. And the only thing I can say, be responsible, right, in everything you do. And I don't want to leave you with a cliche, but in the end, be responsible, please.
Sometimes the most cliched phrases are the most accurate and most understandable ones. And live with responsibility is a great idea as well. Yeah. I think it's perfect, Roel. So that was brilliant. Yeah. Thank you very much. I've been your host, Ben Hewison. This has been Artificial Intelligence versus Sustainability. Have wonderful Wednesdays, everybody, and thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.